Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. So, welcome to week 3. So, today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're going to be reading about this week and also give you some feedback on what you've been doing thus far. So, this week you have just one chapter to read. We're going to be reading chapter 6 from the book, which is about research ethics, and you will complete your third perusal number 3, which is also about research ethics. Now, this week we do have an optional Zoom discussion. So if you would prefer to do that versus put your annotations in perusal, that will be this Thursday, September 8th at 5:15. If you want to come there, we'll be discussing research ethics. And then if you have other questions, maybe about your research question or other things that we are doing in the class, you'll be able to ask those questions then. So in addition to chapter 6 and perusal number 3, we also have the city training that is due next Sunday, September 11th. So just as a reminder, I want to remind you how to register for city training and which of those you should be doing. So in iCollege, you can go to the assignment. I'll link it in this week's announcements. So there you can get the link to register for city. You'll register through your organization and select Georgia State and create your login information. Now, once you're logged in, and so here you can see you put in Georgia State, and that will allow you to create your profile. Now, the course that you need to complete for this class is Group 2 Social and Behavioral, the basic course. It will be 12 modules. And again, like I shared with you last week, for each module, they'll give you a quiz. The quiz on those determines whether or not you get the certificate. But as far as your grade for this class, that's not based on your performance on the quiz. It's based on you mastering and completing the module. So you are able to go back and retake the quizzes as many times as you need to as you work through that certification. So once you have worked your way through the 12 modules, you will get this certificate. Here's mine here. And this is a certificate that you will upload to iCollege by September 11th for that portion of that assignment. And also in iCollege, I did link a different Google slide that goes through these steps about how to register, and then also some notes from each of the modules. So if you want to have that open as well as a study guide, that can also help you as you're working through the modules. And then this also goes nicely with chapter 6, which is about research ethics. Some of the same topics are included in this chapter as you will be going through in City. So that's the first announcement about our city training. Now, I also wanted to talk to you about our discussion last week. So last week we read chapters 4 and 5, and one of the topics was about research questions, and you also submitted your research question in iCollege. And so the text talks about the importance of the research question and some of the things to consider, but some of you are asking for a more specific guide on developing research questions. And so it is an iterative process. So there's a lot of different strategies that researchers employ when developing their research questions. One thing that I like to do and a lot of researchers recommend is to just start drafting a series of questions. Try out several different phrases, wordings, and then once you have this long list, you can go back and revise and par down and edit and craft the research question that really captures what it is that you're trying to investigate. And I really enjoyed the discussion on perusal with the funnel from topic to question to hypotheses and which way you conceptualize better. So just thinking about that, starting with your topic and then drafting some questions, thinking about the participants that you're planning to include, the research site, and the variables that you might be considering, and thinking of some different ways to put together a research question until you get to one that really resonates with you and captures what you're trying to study. But here is a bit of a guide that I am working on just to help you a little bit when you're thinking about your research questions. So this table is organized by design, if whether you're doing a quantitative study, qualitative study, or mixed methods. So if you're doing a quantitative study, you will make clear in your research question your variables. So here is a little script or template that you can use to kind of loosely think about how to start to develop these types of questions for a quantitative study. Like what is or how does the, and then you would either say relationship between impact of, or if you have a different phrasing, that's okay, of the independent variable affect the dependent variable for participants in research site. So as an example, what is the impact of, and then, so that's the first part. I said, what is, I chose impact, and then independent variable. So in this research question, the independent variable is 60 minutes of daily guided reading instruction. So that is the item that I am interested in understanding, what the efficacy of this program is, what is the effect of it. So that is my independent variable, is guided reading instruction for 60 minutes. So you can see I made it specific, daily, how much time, and the exact program that I'm looking at. And then my on is Georgia milestone scores. Okay, for participants, students with disabilities at research site Charles Drew Charter School. So that's an example of how you can start to put together a quantitative research question, thinking about what is the relationship of independent variable on dependent variable, or how does the independent variable impact the dependent variable for. So that is hopefully helpful for those of you crafting a quantitative research question, to make sure that you're thinking about your independent variable. That is the program or the instrument or the strategy or the pedagogical approach that you want to understand the effectiveness of. So you would ask, what is or how is this item that you're studying? What is the effect on, and then how are you going to measure that? Is it test scores? Is it survey scores? There's so many different ways to do it. And we're going to talk more about selecting the appropriate instruments as we get into the coming chapters about quantitative design, and then think about the actual participants and research sites. So that hopefully that's helpful. And again, you can always draft and revise, and researchers do this throughout the research process, where they're constantly going back to the research question and tweaking it and adjusting it to make it fit exactly what they're hoping to capture. Now, for a qualitative study, you don't have variables in the way that you do in a quantitative study, because you are not collecting data that is numerical. So an example would be, for your script would be, how or what do, and then participants at research site, how do they experience, describe, engage with, and there could be other verbs that you use here that are also appropriate for qualitative research design with, and then your research topic. So for instance, how do early adolescent girls read literature that falls outside of the realm of fiction? So here you can see who the participants are, adolescent girls. This one doesn't have research site, but it could be more specific if you did include that. And then this one said, how do they read? So instead of saying experience, describe, or engage, they use the verb read. That's also appropriate. And then the research topic, literature that falls outside the realm of fiction. So here with this, there's so many different data sources that you could collect to help you answer that question. And then in a mixed methods design, you would have your quantitative question, your qualitative question, and then your mixed methods question. Your mixed methods question is focused on the interaction between the quantitative data that you collected and the qualitative data that you collected. So for that one, how or what do the qualitative data sources, how do they further explain, or what do they reveal about the quantitative data sources? So as you are crafting your research question and you submit it in iCollege, I'll be giving you feedback to help you make it more specific, to make sure that you're including the participants, the exact research site, and making sure that it is answerable based on empirical data that you can collect. So I did put in perusal as well a link to several resources. Colleen Jordan asked a question about that. So you can find that in the first part of perusal number 2, where I left a comment with some links to a few sources that also talk about developing the research question. But this guide is here for you too, if you're struggling to think about how to get started. So open-ended, but it is answerable by data, whether it be categorical data, numerical data. You can use a variety of types of data to answer the question, but it is still specific. So hopefully that's helpful as you are developing your research questions. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about our previous discussion is about the multiple choice questions in perusal. So let me go there now. Okay, I wanted to go over a few of the multiple choice questions from this week. So the first one that I wanted to go over was number 4, and this was based on where researchers get research topics. And there was some good discussion in Perusal as well about places to get sources for ideas. It might be at your job, your place of work. That's going to be a great source for inspiration for things that you might want to study. And so many of you have already given some great suggestions for that. And then also previous research. So that's something that someone else mentioned in the comments, that researchers are often leaving questions that need to be taken up and studied. And so that's a great place. So in this question, it was talking about a researcher who's looking at teacher burnout. And this part of the question was unclear. I think that this is what led to a lot of the confusion. It says most of this research identified. So this is referring to existing research. So most of the existing research on the topic identified different variables in rural and urban settings. And so this researcher is inspired by that previous research, but interested in identifying if the factors are different. So they use past research to help them design this study. Now, there is certainly overlap. It could be a practical issue for this researcher. Maybe they work in a rural setting and the research that they're reading is primarily focused in an urban setting. So they're curious what that would be. So it could be related to a practical issue or their everyday life. And then even theoretical, if some of the research is theoretical papers versus empirical research papers. But this part, again, was unclear, but this was referring to most of the existing literature was about those different variables. And then this researcher, after reading that previous research, came up with this approach. So I just wanted to explain a little bit there because I apologize if that one was unclear. Okay, the next question that I wanted to go over was number 6. So this study, it says that after stating the purpose, they gave one or more hypotheses to be tested. Now, if you are planning a quantitative study, you're always going to include the hypotheses in your introduction, along with the potential significance of the study. So that's why when you are writing a quantitative research question, you need to include the variables in the question. And then you would go on to say what your hypothesis is for how those variables will interact with each other. So that's why this one is quantitative. Qualitative research, since there's not variables most often, there's most often not a hypothesis that needs to be stated. And then qualitative research is research that's based on qualitative data, describing people's experiences or perceptions. And grounded theory and ethnography are both types of qualitative research. So the only one that's quantitative is the first one. And then I also wanted to go over number 8. So number 8 was talking about analyzing data. So it says involve coding, searching for relationships between data collected from observations, interviews, documents, films. That is a qualitative study. So these are data sources that are appropriate for qualitative design, interviewing people, analyzing documents, films, or observing a classroom or some type of interaction that is qualitative. So once you have that type of data, the analysis approach, instead of carrying out statistical analysis as you would for quantitative data, numerical data, to find the correlation or the relationship between the variables, if you're collecting qualitative data like an interview, the analysis process is different. And we will go more into depth into these in later chapters, but I just wanted to go over those multiple choice questions. So if there's others that you thought were confusing or you wanted more explanation about, please let me know about that. And while we are in Perusal, I wanted to talk a little bit about how you navigate the assignments. So here we are in week 2. So it will always start off with the lecture. When you click this icon right here, you can see all conversations. You can go through to read other people's annotations or questions. So this is the question that I mentioned about research questions. So here you can see my response, and then these are some links to help you develop research questions if they're helpful. So this one is a guide from another university. This one is about qualitative research papers. This one is about both. And then this is a chapter, a draft of a chapter from another research methods course that goes into depth. So that's how you navigate that. Now, make sure that you're clicking at the bottom. It says continue to more parts. So the second part of the assignment will be the lecture slides that go with the book. So I'm including here the most salient parts, in my opinion. I try to highlight where I can if there's areas that I want you to focus your attention. So here you can see there is a little bit here about how the research problem relates to the research question. So again, for quantitative, we're asking about the relationship between two variables. And then it goes with, this relates to last week's, or the lecture in this part too, talking about the research purpose. And then qualitative, that's about the issue, like how do these participants experience this phenomenon. And then mixed methods, some details here about that. So you can put a comment here. Someone mentioned that, I know a lot of you have a hard copy of the book. If you have that, you might be jotting down notes. You can always put a note here that you took or a thought that you had as you were reading the book. And then the next part is about, these are the review questions. So as you can see here, for perusal number 2, several classmates have answered these review questions. You should pick 1 to 2 each week that you want to respond to. And then the final part, if you like to practice multiple choice questions, those are here. That's something you can do just to help you review and get ready for the midterm and the final. So when you are doing the perusal assignments, I'm looking for 4 to 5 or more annotations over the course of the whole assignment. So how I recommend breaking that down is, first you'll start with the lecture video. I'll try to ask a question or two, or if you have a question, someone asked a question, which was great as they were watching, you can leave 1 or 2 annotations about the lecture. If you want to leave a note here during the slides, you can, or a question, and then answer 1 to 2 of these. And then the quiz is optional, but it does help increase your score and perusal if you do those. So after you have completed the whole perusal assignment, you should have left 4 to 5 annotations. So that is what I'm using for your score. And again, you can always go back and add more if I give you some feedback about that. So let's go back to the checklist for this week, and then we will go ahead and move on to the lecture part. So again, this week we are doing chapter 6, perusal number 3. There is the optional Zoom, and then your city training is due. And do check iCollege for feedback on your research question. Okay, have a great week and reach out to me via email if you have any questions. Bye-bye.